They didn't wear badges. They wore masks. In the dead of night, the hills of Appalachia echoed with hoots and warnings. Pine switches, red thread, burned doorways. And when the law failed, the shadows answered. Tonight, we uncover the hidden history of Appalachian Vigilantes, forgotten enforcers who rose when sheriffs vanished. These weren't legends. These were real men and women who made justice personal and permanent. Before the smoke cleared from the Civil War, a different kind of resistance was already forming, this time in secret. In the backwoods of western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, the Red Strings weren't just a rumor. They were Unionist vigilantes, loyal to the cause even after surrender, fighting back against returning Confederates who tried to retake their towns. Their symbol was simple: a thread of red yarn tied to fence posts. Porch rails were sometimes left tucked in the pocket of a man found dead along the trail. Some called them heroes. Others called them traitors. Either way, everyone understood the warning. They operated under cover of night, helping draft dodgers escape, sabotaging supply routes, and targeting anyone who enforced Confederate loyalty after the war. Entire towns quietly chose sides. Pastors preached neutrality by day, then rode with the Red Strings by night. In one mountain hamlet, a Confederate sympathizer's barn was burned to ash, his livestock slaughtered. A red string was nailed to the door with a knife. No arrests were made. No witnesses came forward. Just silence and a story that spread like wildfire. Rumors told of secret oaths and rifles buried in creek beds, of neighbors who wore Union blue beneath their Sunday black. These weren't men who waited for Reconstruction. They rewrote their own. And when the dust finally settled, the Red Strings disappeared as quietly as they had come. But the message lingered in those hills. Even after war, justice didn't come from Washington. It came from the people who survived it. After the Red Strings vanished into legend, Appalachia didn't go quiet. It simply changed uniforms. In the shadow of Brush Mountain, Southwest Virginia birthed a new kind of justice. Where Red Strings once left yarn, these men left no color, only silence. Locals called them the Watchmen. Brush Mountain wasn't marked on most maps, and those who lived near it didn't mark it in conversation either. By the 1870s, it became known as a place where disputes ended before sheriffs were even summoned. A place where justice came not from a courtroom, but from somewhere higher up the ridge. Travelers spoke of being followed along the switchbacks, of horses glimpsed between the trees. At night, pine groves whispered with movement, but no name was ever spoken, no face ever remembered. Only one thing stayed constant. When the watchmen watched, things stopped going wrong. Justice in Brush Mountain didn't come with trials or records. When a man stole from his neighbor or beat his wife, the law might take weeks to respond. The watchmen, they needed no badge. A man would disappear for 3 nights, then return with broken ribs and silent eyes, or not return at all. No one admitted to calling for them. No one admitted to being one. Yet every cabin had its own story. A boot print left on a windowsill, a horseshoe impression near the barn, a warning carved into wood. Seen. By the late 1880s, stories of a leader emerged, a tall figure in a dark coat known only as the man with the hollow eyes. They said he'd been a Union scout during the war, left for dead near Cold Harbor, and returned half a ghost. Witnesses, few and unreliable, claimed his stare could make dogs whimper and grown men cry. Whether he existed or not didn't matter. His myth was enough. One story told of a traveling merchant who tried to cheat a widow. 3 nights later, he was found a mile off the trail. Boots missing, ledgers burned, and the words "not here" scratched into his wagon tongue. Even lawmen knew where their limits ended. County deputies refused to ride past Brush Hollow after dusk. One sheriff, newly elected from Richmond, tried to send a posse up to serve a warrant on a known bootlegger in 1891. Only 2 came back. They said nothing, only handed the badge back and moved out of state. From that year on, Brush Mountain was listed in court documents as unreachable terrain. But the locals didn't seem worried. Theft rates dropped. Assaults vanished, all without a single trial. By 1905, the watchmen were more shadow than presence. Some said the man with the hollow eyes was buried beneath the ridge, under a cedar that never grew moss. Others claimed he left for the Rockies, hunting men who had fled justice. Either way, the watchman faded, at least in practice. But on cold nights, when the wind howls through the trees and the dogs bark at nothing, old-timers still say, "Brush, don't forget. Maybe the watchmen never left. Maybe they're just waiting for another crooked soul to climb too high." By the time the watchmen of Brush Mountain faded into whispers, the mountains to the south had already started listening. In Panther Gap, a narrow, windswept divide tucked between the North Carolina border and the Smokies, locals spoke of a new presence, similar in silence but different in judgment. These weren't veterans or Union loyalists. They were sons of coal miners, farmers, widows, children who'd grown up with stories of red strings and hollow eyes and decided their justice didn't need uniforms, only conviction. Where the watchmen ended, the ridge watchers began. They didn't wear masks. They didn't need to. In Panther Gap, everyone knew who they were, and no one dared to name them. If someone's livestock was poisoned or a widow's roof left to rot, a stack of firewood would appear overnight, neatly chopped with a river stone placed on top, etched with a mark that looked like an eye. That mark became known as the Night Stone. It wasn't just a warning, it was an offer. Fix the wrong, or the ridge would. After one wealthy landowner tried to force out tenant families during a drought, he woke to find every fence on his property dismantled and stacked neatly at his front gate. No one saw who did it. No one asked. In 1896, a girl went missing along a winding ridge trail north of Panther Gap. The county sheriff, citing lack of evidence, closed the case in days. But 3 weeks later, the girl returned, silent, bruised, but safe. She wouldn't speak, but her mother found a smooth stone in her dress pocket, the same eye symbol etched deep. A week later, the man suspected by locals disappeared. All that was left was a trail of broken brush into the woods and a rope tied to a tree, swinging gently in the wind. Again, no charges. Again, no questions. The trail was renamed Widow's Trail, and to this day, hikers report strange calm there. Like being watched, but protected. The ridge watchers became myth fast, mostly because no one could agree if they were real. Some said they were just one family, passing down the roll like heirlooms. Others believed the hills themselves gave rise to justice when the law refused to climb. What's certain is that for nearly 40 years, Panther Gap had near zero reported violent crimes, despite neighboring counties turning lawless. And when a stranger from out of state tried to dig into land rights for coal mining in 1912, his survey crew left within 24 hours, silent, pale, and minus all their gear. A report filed months later described their camp being surrounded at night by unseen riders who never spoke, but left night stones beside every tent. By the 1930s, roads had carved into the mountains, and the world got louder. Panther Gap slowly emptied. Young folks left, homesteads grew moss-covered, and the night stones stopped appearing. But not everyone forgot. To this day, hikers speak of a wind that shifts too suddenly, of rocks placed where no one walked. In one chapel by the ridge, an old woman keeps a glass jar of marked stones, each one left anonymously at her door over the decades. She just smiles and says, "Some wrongs still get righted, even when no one's watching." And sometimes, in that thin place where justice once rode silent horses beneath the pines, the air still holds its breath. Panther Gap faded into the mist like a whispered warning, but the silence it left behind spread wider than anyone expected. Just over the ridge, in a place called Birch Rock, something older stirred, something that didn't need names or stories to survive. While the watchers of Panther Gap left stones, the hills of Birch Rock carved their messages into bark. By the turn of the century, strange signs began appearing along creek trails and fence posts. Birch leaves nailed to doors, symbols etched deep into tree trunks. Some said the watchers had simply moved. Others believed something new had risen. Either way, justice had changed uniforms again. No more nightstones, no more trails. In Birch Rock, it was all silence and shadow, and a quiet oath whispered under the trees. Locals spoke of a figure known only as the Carver, never seen, only known by the marks he left behind. Entire birch trunks were stripped clean overnight, symbols carved in perfect symmetry spiraling from root to crown. A man who cheated his neighbor would wake to find his front gate lashed shut with vines, a carved branch propped against it like a sentence. In 1907, after a girl went missing and the town preacher refused to investigate, he arrived at church one Sunday to find his pulpit gone, replaced by a cross-section of birch etched with the word, "Look." He resigned that week and left town without saying goodbye. Birch Rock had no jail. It didn't need one. Wrongdoers stopped walking at night. Strangers left before sundown. There were stories of those who didn't, drifters, gamblers, even a traveling judge, who stayed just long enough to feel the eyes watching from the birch grove outside town. One merchant claimed to have seen figures standing motionless at dusk, dressed in forest-dyed coats with bark smeared across their faces. But when he lit a lantern, they were gone. No footprints, just dew disturbed and a faint carving on the tree nearest him. A single ring, like a ripple in wood. By 1915, the term birch oath had crept into neighboring hollows, spoken only by those who swore they'd seen it happen. A family of known swindlers vanished overnight. Their cabin remained untouched, but every window had been blackened with ash from the inside. Birch leaves covered the floor, pressed flat into concentric circles. Some said it was a code. Others believed it was a ritual. But one thing was clear. The Birch Rock Vigilantes didn't punish out of rage. They acted with purpose, as if fulfilling a promise that stretched deeper than law, older than memory. By the 1920s, the Birch Rock sign slowed. The carvings faded. Outsiders moved in, and new roads were laid. The forest began to quiet. But not everyone believed the oath had been broken. Some said the watchers had simply learned patience, that justice could wait, like roots beneath snow. In recent years, campers have reported waking to find patterns of birch leaves around their tents. One hiker claimed to see a figure with bark-covered arms vanish behind a ridge. Maybe the oath still holds. Maybe it never needed to be spoken. And maybe silence in places like this isn't absence, it's a warning. Just west of Birch Rock, the ridgelines twisted tighter, narrowing into stone corridors that locals called Devil's Gate. It wasn't marked on maps, but travelers knew to avoid it after dusk. The wind there howled low and mean, like it remembered something. Stories passed quietly, of men gone missing near the bluffs, of flickering lanterns seen bobbing in the trees when no one was supposed to be there. After the birch oath faded, Devil's Gate became the new whisper, place not just watched but warned. By the early 1930s, tales of the lantern keepers spread. Not vigilantes in the traditional sense, these were watchers of a different kind. Instead of markings or symbols, they used light. A single lantern left on a porch could mean a debt had gone unpaid. 2 lanterns side by side in a window, that was a final warning. Witnesses reported seeing hooded figures placing them, always at night, always silent. One man tried removing a lantern before dawn. He left the county the next day, said nothing, left everything. Near the edge of Devil's Gate stood a dead pine, split by lightning but still rooted in stone. Locals called it the Toll Tree. For years, it was said to be where the lantern keepers gathered or judged. Some mornings, travelers found items tied to its branches: a sheriff's badge, a gambler's dice, a child's ribbon. Whatever story those things told, no one asked. And yet, every time something appeared, a problem in town seemed to disappear, quietly, permanently. There were rumors of a woman known only as the Carrier, seen walking the ridgeline with a lantern in hand, face never clear, steps never hurried. One miner said she passed him without a sound, and days later, his foreman, known for beating workers, vanished from the site. Some say she was real. Others said she was a ghost born from guilt. Either way, the story kept growing. And in Devil's Gate, that was enough to keep most folks honest. Even today, hikers claim to see lantern lights where no trails exist. Forest rangers have dismissed them as tricks of fog and dusk. But old-timers in the valley towns still pause when they see a light swinging in the distance, especially if it doesn't flicker with wind. Maybe the lantern keepers are gone. Or maybe they're just waiting, like the others before them, waiting for the next name, the next debt, the next trail that needs watching. The light from Devil's Gate doesn't just fade. It passes on, from one hollow to the next, from one generation of watchers to another. Appalachia has never needed sirens to signal justice. It had signals of its own. Red strings, carved bark, night stones, and silent lanterns burning where roads end. The red strings sparked a fire when the war ended. The watchmen of Brush Mountain carried it up the ridgelines. The ridge watchers of Panther Gap watched by night when law forgot the day. The birch rock oath etched warnings into the trees. And the lantern keepers of Devil's Gate, well, they never left the path. Maybe none of them truly did. Maybe in these hills, justice never needed a courtroom, just a cause and a shadow to walk beside it. So, which story stayed with you? Was it the thread, the carving, the silent watcher? Or the feeling that some oaths are older than memory? There are still places where the woods go quiet when you pass. Still trails where you feel more seen than alone. Would you dare walk them? Because out here, in the hush between heartbeats and hoofprints, the old ways still wait. And sometimes they're watching you back.